tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of sadness. This is
Good morning, everyone. Conley here. We are the Science Knights. I have two knights here assembled with me, and I have Dr. Sean Graham and Dr. Thomas Shiller here in the house with me. And we're actually going to be talking about a very interesting subject today, talking all about, we've talked about apex predators, right? It seems like apex predators get all the glam, all the hype, all the romantic stories. But today we're actually going to be talking about the opposite of that, apex defenders. And when we think about apex defenders, I think about a few animals. I think about the ones that are very evasive, that can get away from predators. But also what's really cool is the biology behind the evolution of the tanks, the big, just tanky, like a tortoise or turtle, Ankylosaurus. There's so many cool animals out there that have developed this system of defense that we can talk about, and I'm really looking forward to that. So let's go ahead and start off with maybe we can start off with the ancient ones, and then we can talk about the evolution today of how it came to be.
Sure.
So
I guess if we're gonna go to the oldest of the sort of tank defenders, probably should start with turtles. Turtles,
ancient turtles.
Turtles are funny because you mentioned, we always think of predators and these cool, sexy dinosaurs and things, but turtles are really cool. And they evolved back in the Triassic, and they've been chugging along since. And once they sort of arrived at that body plan, the living tank body plan, they just kind of stuck with it, and it worked. And if you look at a modern turtle, it's probably, and Sean probably has more insight on this, probably one of the hardest things for a predator to eat, to kill, and take down, even though it's this little unassuming animal. But I think we've done a show on turtles. It's been a while, but their evolutionary history is pretty cool.
Did we cover the evolutionary history of turtles?
We did. Yeah.
Really?
I don't remember it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we've done 250 episodes, so we've probably done turtles a couple of times.
Well,
we might do a whole episode on turtles, and I would get you to review the evolution. This is one. It's worth repeating though, because it was got a funny anecdote to go with it. That one of our nemeses, our scientific nemeses that we have in common, me and Thomas, once was like joking about how the first turtles that ever existed on Earth just look like modern turtles. And that's exactly how he talked. And he was joking about it because like this guy was obviously a secret creationist, and they like to point out examples like that where something would just appear out of nowhere in the fossil record as a fully formed. And that would stretch credulity, right? If a turtle really did appear in the fossil record as a fully formed turtle. And, in a way, he was right. Like for the longest time, the first turtle was this thing, Proganocheles, which is basically a turtle with teeth. The only thing primitive about it.
Like actual teeth, or like?
Yeah, like full on teeth. And no modern turtle has teeth. And so there's other primitive features, but they're like technical things. And the teeth are the most obvious. But then just in the last 20 years, we found a bunch of really good fossils that have bridged that gap. And now we've got it's like one of the best documented transitions in the fossil record. So he was right in a sense, but as usual, he was completely wrong, and he was always an asshole. So anyway, that's a fun story to review. But yeah, in the fossil record, I guess, that is the first example, and that like the
aside from armored fishes, like the.
Right.
So did turtles evolve from armored fishes? Like, when you think about like the actual evolutionary biology behind it, was an external force required for it to transform into that?
So that's one of the, I think this is what initiated that episode that we did a couple of years ago is they discovered all these really great transitional and offshoots of that lineage. And it goes all the way back to the Permian as far as we know. So even before the Mesozoic, but it's a group of terrestrial reptiles who modified their ribs to form. Some of them formed a carapace. Some of them just formed the plastron, the belly armor. And then eventually we get Progenachilles that is a fully fledged turtle. So with the discovery of these fossils, we know that okay, they were sort of experimenting with it, and then they fell on the living tank sort of squat, upper and lower shell sort of configuration. But one of the mysteries there is, why did they do it? And these are mostly terrestrial reptiles, so the thought is that they were fossorial, so that they would burrow just like some modern turtles do, and they flattened out their ribs to help, dig and burrow through the earth. So
kind of like a gopher body plan first, or like a woodchuck body plan.
Yeah.
So mammals that are burrowers can become this kind of stout, squat shoveler, right? This shoving thing. Mm-hmm. And we've got examples of that within mammals, but then eventually from that you get this fully armored thing. And so that would be the kind of transition. I can see that. That's a pretty good scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, it works. And it would be hard to find really solid evidence to support whether or not it was that or defense, but probably a combination of both. Once you start forming a hard shell, there's going to be some obvious advantage to that. The disadvantage, as we see with a lot of these apex defenders, is they have to give up mobility and things like that. But when you cover yourself in armor, you really don't need to move that fast.
Yeah. And I'll mention something, like you were hinting at this, Thomas, like how well defended are they? And if you look at a modern tortoise, right, that we've got a native tortoise in Texas, the Texas tortoise, it only gets about maybe a foot long. It's super well defended, heavy shell. They're kind of diggers. They'll find themselves a little burrow. Gopher tortoise is in Florida. It's even bigger, and they dig these huge burrows that they escape into, so they're like doubly defended. And they both get eaten by predators. Deadly.
Yeah.
So this is where, we're going to kind of set these up as potential apex defenders, and then say, no, it doesn't defend them completely.
Yeah.
So mountain lions can gnaw on a Texas tortoise long enough to get into it and eat it. And wolves could do the same thing, undoubtedly, because modern dogs do it. They'll get a hold of a box turtle, and box turtles are the only turtles that can actually completely shut their shell behind themselves, which is unbelievable to think, because their clavicle, the whole upper body, girdle, and the pelvis is inside the shell, so they can pull all their legs and head and neck and everything inside, and then they've got a hinge that can shut it behind them.
Wow,
unreal.
That's unbelievable.
That's their vertebrae and ribs that they're hiding. So imagine you trying to do that, pulling all of your extremities inside of your rib cage. It's nuts, and they can shut themselves in, and yet then a dog can find them and just gnaw them open if it wants.
Can a fox figure out a way, like a clever fox?
Certainly a small one, but a fox probably wouldn't take the time. So there's always this kind of thing where predators have to decide whether it's worth the effort.
Right.
And they do that. They make these decisions, and it's like that's actually probably what saves these turtles more than their shell, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it would take a mountain lion an hour and a half to gnaw it open. And a mountain lion rarely makes that decision, right? They're going to go, screw that. I've got a much better chance if I just go after I don't want to, but I'm going to eat this javelina instead.
Yeah.
Because the javelina is going to potentially, rip my belly open, but at least I don't spend an hour and a half. At least it'll all be here. And so predators make those kind of decisions. Optimal foraging theory, they call that. This idea that the predators make decisions based on the nutrition content and the pain in the ass that their prey is. And that's probably what saves these turtles more. But if the predator decides to make the effort, they're certainly capable of doing it.
Yeah. Well, I've seen videos of Nile crocodiles just totally decimate aquatic turtles. They'll grab them and just crush them in their mouth and swallow them down like nothing.
Alligators are part of the reason why they've got that broad, snout compared to crocodiles. It could be because they actually eat a decent number of turtles compared to fish, and that big broad, snout that an alligator has is really good at smashing turtle shells.
Yeah, we find evidence of predation in some of the turtles we find in Big Bend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by like Dinosuchus, the big giant crocodilian.
Well,
yeah, that would just be like a pistachio for Dinosuchus, just crunch.
Yeah. Just a real quick little snack there. But yeah, no, I remember growing up that I loved getting the box turtles. Had a whole bunch of different box turtles. They're fascinating. But then you'd get in some little creek beds or rivers, little ponds out there, and we would unearth these giant alligator snapping turtles. I mean, huge alligator snapping turtles. And those were very dangerous. And I remember my dad and me went and got one and brought one home. I mean, the thing weighed a ton. I mean, it weighed a lot. And I remember its neck was so freaking long. And the back of it looked like a dinosaur. It was amazing. Have y'all experienced the alligator snapping turtle?
Not alligator snapping turtles, but just the regular.
What is it, snapper?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've trapped alligator snappers in Georgia, and it's amazing. Like there's the turtles that are most well defended are least vicious. So there's you could almost make a corollary between the two. So alligator snapping turtles actually don't have a very extensive shell, and they can't fit themselves inside their shell like a box turtle. So box turtle can completely hide in its shell,
right?
And it's super timid, never bites.
Yeah,
literally never bites. I've never heard of anyone being bitten by a box turtle. They're sweet. Alligator snapping turtle has a very reduced shell, and therefore they'll scratch the hell out of you. And
yeah, they have those claws, for sure.
So it's interesting. Yeah, I've got some, but we don't want to do the whole story on turtles.
Sure. Yeah.
Apparently, we've already done a whole show on them.
Yeah.
I got to find that show because I don't know where it is.
We're not on the radio anymore, dude.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No time constraints.
Yeah. No time constraints. And we're actually on iHeartRadio now. So we are kind of on the radio.
Okay.
iHeartRadio.
So what's the next tank defender in the fossil record?
Let's talk about the ankylosaurs. I think that's the.
You call it ankylosaur. I've always called it ankylosaurus.
That's a common mispronunciation. It's because you freaking moron.
No. Ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah, a lot of people call them ankylosaurs, but you're switching the Y and the L.
Okay. Ankylosaurus. Okay.
But yeah, it's an interesting group of dinosaurs that emerged in the Jurassic, and they belong to an even more interesting, bigger group of dinosaurs, the Thyreophora, which are armored dinosaurs, but also include Stegosaurus. Okay, so if you look at something like Ankylosaurus and compare it to Stegosaurus, they don't look very similar, but there's some anatomical things that they share.
Well, the Stegosaurus can move its plates, right? Can freely move the plates that are on its back.
They don't have muscles attached to. They're attached to the back, but they probably didn't move them like an appendage or anything.
Okay.
But the ankylosaurs are split into two groups. The Nodosauridae and the Ankylosauridae. So the distinction there is the Ankylosauridae have clubs on their tails. The other group doesn't, but otherwise they're pretty similar. And they're both armored. So they have these specialized bones called dermal bones, osteoderms, that grow within the dermis that form this, in some cases, really sort of ornate and series of armor plates on their back, on their head, on their tail, Some of them even have armor over their eyelids. So they're sort of the optimal example of something that has evolved into a tank. And just like turtles, they're short. They've got short legs. Some of them were enormous, like the size of a car, but they probably sat about a foot off the ground while standing, and really broad, just covered with these thick armor plates. And on the tail of ankylosaurs, the ones that have clubs, they have even more modified dermal bones that form a big, massive club.
Like 3 bowling balls put together.
Yeah, like a couple of bowling balls, just enormous club. You look at that and you don't need much evidence to suggest that that was for fending off predators, right?
And they also have like spikes lining the shell, right?
Some of them have spikes or hornlets, things like that. Some of them have big, sharp projections coming off of their shoulders, and that's where a lot of the variation within the group comes from. Is the configuration of the plates and the spikes on their back and on their skull. Their skull is probably the most interesting thing because the osteoderms are fused to their skull bones. So they've basically taken their skull and multiplied its thickness by, however many inches by fusing these osteoderms to it.
How on earth does that happen throughout evolution? Like what has to happen in order for the variation to take place?
Well, lots of reptiles have osteoderms. Thinking about it, just about every group of reptile I can think of has some form of osteoderm.
Mammals even can have osteoderm.
Yeah, mammals have osteoderm.
There's a recent paper that just demonstrated that the scaly-tailed house mouse, those are osteoderms.
Really? Oh, really?
Yeah.
And if they had that
scaliness, and you ever felt the house mouse? It's kind of a tail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if somebody bothered, like probably the most well-studied animal on Earth, the common laboratory mouse, and they just published this. They did some sort of some sort of an X-ray, really like detailed visual blah blah, something pretty modern, and like a CT scan or something like that. And the damn things are full of tiny little bones. The skin.
That's crazy.
So the dermis would have to, bone is just another kind of tissue. And so all you got to do is, if you have the dermis and you just kind of infuse it with that mineral matrix that bone is made of, then voila, you've got bones in your skin, like some sort of an X-Man, right?
Wow.
And that's kind of what you could do there. And yeah, mammal, like, I guess, assuming maybe the next critter we're going to talk about is when mammals reinvented the ankylosaur in the Cenozoic, that it became a very similar creature. And yeah, that would be the trajectory you go through. Yeah, the osteoderms are all over the place in the vertebrate record.
You talking about that cute little armadillo?
Well, yeah,
we'll get to armadillos.
What's left, but no, before the armadillo, there was the glyptodont.
Yeah, not so cute, not so little.
I get like a.
If you put it side by side with an ankylosaur, they're like nearly the same size.
Yeah. But going back to ankylosaurs real quick, it's another example of one of these highly adapted animals that just appears in the fossil record. The sort of ancestry of ankylosaurs is poorly understood, so we really don't know what group they emerged from. We don't find a lot of ankylosaur fossils because presumably they were kind of solitary animals. It's probably the least common vertebrate fossil that we find in Big Bend. We know they were here, at least Edmontonia, which is a nodosaur. But you'd think something that's covered in thick bone, you'd find at least those osteoderms everywhere, but we don't.
Wow.
And it's kind of an interesting puzzle. But
well, for our listeners, glyptodont, is that how you say it? Glyptodont. It's like half beaver, half anteater, half ankylosaurus.
Yeah, that's our animal.
It's amazing. Yeah. When did this live on the Earth?
They lived right up to the end of the Ice Age.
Yeah, and they showed up like
they're
like
glyptodonts in Florida like 10,000 years ago. There were people who, like Native Americans, probably hunted these things.
mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, their tails look pretty righteous. I mean, is there any kind of archaeology out there showing how we used like these, ultimate defenders for our own survival? Is it?
Well,
I bet people ate them though.
Oh, ate them?
I want to say there's a Clovis point in association with a glyptodont.
Oh my
I
God.
could be wrong, but that's as far as it gets. But yeah, so we should. I guess we're jumping around here, but glyptodonts were a armadillo-like animal belonging to the same group as armadillos, but it was giant. And now there's a giant armadillo that's pretty damn big, and it still exists in South America. It's I don't know, the size of a decent sized charcoal grill, big, like 100 pounds or something like that. But these things were the size of a car. And they had the cool thing about the glyptodont, which I think is neat. It's the same sort of thing. It's a tank-like thing. It's got osteoderms, pretty well defended. It would have been hairy instead of like an ankylosaur, and it had a spike club tail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So that's the coolest thing. Like all those other features, it didn't look quite like an ankylosaur. I mean, it's sort of like it. But the fact that it had a crazy club tail to defend itself is pretty neat, because that's something you wouldn't necessarily expect from convergent evolution to reappear like that, all in the same package. And in the more recent Cenozoic, the age of mammals, mammals came up with an ankylosaur-like critter, the glyptodont.
Yeah, and that group they belong to, the Xenarthans, it's a bizarre group. It includes the sloths.
Oh,
so you
really?
wouldn't think that this giant armored thing is related to a lumbering sloth, but if you look at like the ancient ground sloths and compare their skull shape, it's pretty close.
Wow.
Yeah. But went in total different directions with their defense and life modes.
Yeah, and it's just amazing, because you think, you just like any kind of man out there, you kind of just wonder what's under there. You just kind of
I bet they were delicious. I think about this a lot as a paleontologist, whether or not these extinct things were tasty, but I've heard that armadillo is really tasty. I don't know about sloths, but I bet, and these things are the size of a car, so if some ancient peoples could take one down, that's probably a lot of good meat.
Definitely feed a family of 4 in Alabama, probably.
Yeah. Stuff some garlic and slow roasted.
So ankylosaurs, is there any evidence that, like, of tooth marks, puncture marks, where because even though they're well defended, I'll bet something was able to take them down?
Yeah.
Is there evidence of that?
Yeah. Again, nothing in Big Bend, because we really have nothing. But yeah, they found ankylosaurs with bite marks and things. Yeah. They were living with T-Rex, so Ankylosaurus was living with T-Rex. The thing was the size of a minivan, but T-Rex.
A lot of these is like you have to flip them over in order to get to the soft underbelly, and that's not easy to do. But that's the way a lot of for example, a porcupine is sort of like it's one of these tank-like things, except it's replaced the armor plating with just impenetrable spines, right? That are really painful. And the North American porcupine, the spines actually come off, which you would think that actually makes it worse, right? Because the predator has these things in its face and in its claws, and it's free now to go away while the porcupine runs off.
Yeah.
The echidna in Australia has spines all over it. They don't come off, and that's actually almost worse, because then the defense has to stay with the animal. So it's not going to come off in the claws of a predator. So the predator might feel free to keep going after the echidna. Whereas with the North American porcupine, the spines come off and the animal can run away. That's actually better. But things still get them. A mountain lion just has to kind of swat it just right and knock it over on its back, and it can get to it. And a mountain lion will go after a porcupine and eat a porcupine.
Wow.
Well, I might be wrong or assuming here, but it seems like things that are highly adapted with that sort of defense have smaller brains. Oh, I'm thinking of dinosaurs because the Thyreophora for their body size had the smallest. Stegosaurus having the smallest brain relative to its body.
Didn't they have two brains or no? Was
No.
it Brachiosaurus?
No, they had one brain, and it was really tiny for their body. So it was really tiny, just generally speaking.
Like a little peanut
The
size.
whole two brain legend, right, for the Stegosaurus comes from this. There's an enlarged area near its sacrum, right? And
Yeah.
like near the pelvis where there's just
Yeah.
nerves, and that I don't know how that got transmitted to two brains.
Yeah, butt brain.
I read many of that lore in children's books. There was a brain in its ass with that, and it would control the tail and the little, the
on these little myths that appear in children's books. And all we need is Conley to just tell us what he thinks about something, and it would be full of these things.
It really would be.
Or we could have our 4-year-olds on.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
Little
but I wonder if there's a correlation between animals that put a lot of their sort of adaptive strength into defense. Because the reason I thought of that is I had this survival book when I was a kid. It was called How to Stay Alive in the Forest. And the guy who wrote it was an actual survival expert and lived out in the woods by himself. And one of the funniest descriptions in there was he was talking about hunting different forest game. And the first paragraph was like, the porcupine is the best game you can hunt in the forest. They may seem, intimidating or daunting, but they are, and I think his exact words, they are so dumb that you can approach them with a club or a stick and beat them over the head. And
Wow.
their hindquarters are delicious.
Eat hindquarter.
That's probably right. Yeah, they certainly probably seem to think that they're invincible, and they act like it. So they kind of wander along, and they don't worry about something coming out of nowhere and snatching them. And if you're something else, right? If you're a gray squirrel, the chances of something coming out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And just snatching you up is so good that you always have to be vigilant. With a porcupine, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If something comes after you, it's going to come after you, it's going to have to shift around delicately, come sneaking up, and you're going to get in a fight with this thing first, and then it's going to be able to erect those the quills. So the mountain lion can get them, and it takes a big chance when it does that, because a mountain lion could end up with quills in its paws, and it can end up starving to death after eating the porcupine. But first is eating the porcupine. So for the porcupine's point of view, it's all over. There is a mammal that more or less specializes on eating porcupines, and it does what you're kind of talking about, Tom. Is it smashes it in the face in a way. So the fisher is a type of it's a weasel-like creature up in the northern kind of boreal forests. Closest to Texas would be I think they come down the Rockies quite a way. So they'd be down in Yellowstone, places like that. And they're out in Canada and whatnot. So it's somewhere halfway between the size of a weasel and a wolverine. So it's a decent size weasel. And a fisher will attack a porcupine by grabbing it by the face and then munching on its face until it's killed it.
Wow.
And so it avoids the quills by going after the head. There's no quills on the head. And it's got to fight with it. It's got to be quick, because the porcupine, meanwhile, is going to be trying to quill it. Right? It's going to have all those quills up and erected. It's going to be pissed off. It's going to be trying to reach around it and shove those quills. And they've got to, they're doing that thing. But that's how fishers do it. They just get them by the head, and it's brutal as hell.
What's the brain size on a fisher?
Big.
Oh, it's a
Way
lot bigger
bigger.
than the
They're
porcupine.
smart. Weasels are really smart critters, and their head, they would have among the largest brain size of any of the predators. Weasels are really smart, and unlike a wolf, right, where wolves have that kind of combined intelligence that works in their favor,
Right.
because they're pack animals.
Right.
Weasels, almost all of them are solitary hunters, and so they've got to be able to do all of their killing on their own. And they'll often eat things bigger than their own body. They're really good. And so, fishers just munch on that head. They figured it out. And fishers will eat, where there's lots of porcupines around, they'll eat almost nothing but porcupines. unbelievable. So they become so there's another example where we can't really consider a porcupine an apex defender because something has figured out how to kill them with relish. Yeah.
We'll put a little relish on the side. Put a little mustard on there. So
that's what I meant with relish.
Okay.
It's with pickled relish.
Yeah, with pickled relish on the side. Yeah, exactly. But okay, so when we're talking about apex defenders, we've talked about Ankylosaurus. There's and some of the variations, right? Like so, when we're moving through the timeline, we've talked about turtles here. Now we've talked about what were they called again? The
Glyptodons.
Glyptodons, yeah. I've seen plenty of armadillos out there, and I don't even know what their predator is. I mean, they seem pretty safe, except from an 18-wheeler.
Yeah, that's another good example. They're morons, and they allow close approach.
Yeah.
Because I think it is because they're not constantly getting nailed by things out of the middle of nowhere that can. So if an owl were to just quickly descend on an armadillo, it quickly realize that it can't do much with it, so they don't bother. But you can easily. I've caught an armadillo. That's an incredible experience, and it's not that hard to do.
No.
That's if I could catch a bloody armadillo, imagine how like a wolf could make short work of them. Absolutely. And all they got to do is flip them over, and you'll find the soft underbelly. And so they're pretty well defended. I would say they're defended from like the rapid attack from nowhere, which is usually what things experience. Like, your average chipmunk and gray squirrel just gets a hawk comes out of nowhere and nails them without them ever having known there was a predator there. But armadillos are protected from that. But from a determined predator who's figured out how to kill them, they're not that well defended. They can easily be flipped over. So then they do other things. So an armadillo doesn't just have the bony things. They have a really interesting defense where they'll jump up into midair a couple of feet. And imagine if you're a wolf and you grab an armadillo, suddenly it jumps and knocks you in the face.
Wow.
So that's pretty good. If they're startled, they'll jump 2 feet up in the air. And then they also have burrows. So they'll run down a burrow, and then they're pretty safe from a predator. The 2-foot jump thing doesn't help them when they get driven over by a car. So that's a lot of the armadillos you see smashed on the road. A lot of them, I'm sure the redneck who smashed them has swerved to kill them. So there's that. But a lot of times people will try to drive over them, right? They'll straddle them and try to drive over them to not hit them. And then the armadillo will jump up 2 feet up in the air because it's startled and then kill itself. Well, it's terrible. But yeah, armadillos are pretty well defended. They're morons. We're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can still talk about apex defenders on land like that we know about, like, the most defended creature out there.
What are you hinting at?
I'm hinting at going deep down into the ocean. Okay. Are there any more, like, because there's 2 different worlds here. There's one above ground, one below ground, and there's also one in the air, but I don't see any flying armadillos out there unless they're jumping.
Well, we're also just focusing on sort of armor and deterrent stuff,
right?
But you can, an apex defender just by getting away from things,
right? The evasion,
I was going to say speed is kind of another kind of apex defense that has. And this is another one where, with all these things, there's an arms race where, if you're the fastest, impala out on the Great Plains of Africa, the cheetah's got you.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that happened in the ocean, with the fishes. That's why the armored fishes presumably went extinct, because they couldn't keep up with things like sharks that were rapidly evolving and becoming faster swimmers. The bony fish, the fish that you get in the freezer section, evolved because of that. They had to.
That's really good. Yeah.
They had to avoid sharks.
A little bit more. Yeah. Tell us.
Yeah.
What the fish were like. We did. That's great. We had hammered fish that were tanks in the sea.
Yeah, and they were sort of slow moving. There were predators, there were bottom feeders, sort of filling the same ecological niches that we have with fishes today. But then we started getting more reduction of the external armor, and the sharks evolved, and alongside that, the things that the sharks were eating had to evolve to keep away from them. So fish became more fast moving. They evolved a flexible internal skeleton, and that's how you have fish sticks today. Yeah.
If you look at the, what is it, the Devonian, what was that giant placoderm?
Dunkleosteus.
Osteus?
Yeah.
Wow.
Dunkleosteus, if you Google picture of that, it looks like something from your nightmares. Big.
Yeah. Size of a school bus.
Size of a school bus?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's all covered in armor. Would probably been pretty slow, and it was replaced by sharks, which then more or less retained the apex predator role forever since.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, mammals have moved in on them and taken some of their turf, and probably some reptiles did the same thing in the Mesozoic, but sharks have been there ever since. And you gotta think, well, how did, by being fast, did a shark kill off Dunkleosteus? And that might not have been the way it worked, right? So killing it off is one thing, but how about outcompeting it?
Yeah. That's the thought. Yeah.
And then if you're an adult shark that's the size of Dunkleosteus, and there's baby Dunkleosteus,
Oh yeah,
is running around,
there you go.
sharks are just gobbling them up. So you got to think about, all these apex defenders we've talked about when they're young are still super vulnerable.
Yeah, you would also think that, like, you would also really kind of conclude that you can only evolve so much, right, before you're weighed down so much to where you can't even move. Like,
Yeah, there are definite restrictions, less so in the water, because you don't have to deal with gravity. But Cope's law basically dictates how big or how massive something can be, especially on land.
Yeah.
So it's all a balance of do I evolve this bulky armor to help me? Do I get as big as I possibly can? Do I get super fast and mobile?
So that kind of dictates the arms race. Like, if you can evolve better, you win, right? Like, pretty easy.
There's this hypothesis out there that the pronghorn, our local awesome antelope, they're not really related to antelope in Asia. So our local pronghorn is a endemic family in North America. It's the only place where it occurs, and it's the last of its family. So there used to be all these antelopes, quote unquote, in North America. They all went extinct with the pronghorn. And they filled the same niche as antelopes in the old world, but they're completely different animals. They belong to a different family. Really cool, very unique. There's one of two unique mammals in North America found nowhere else, and they're fast as hell. They're nearly as fast as a cheetah. I want to say they may be the second fastest land mammal on Earth, and yet they don't have a predator like a cheetah chasing them. And the idea is that there was a cheetah in North America. There's fossils of it, and
you're not talking about like a ocelot or anything.
No, it's a cheetah, and it may even belong to the same genus as the cheetahs in the old world. So it's full on. And if it didn't belong to that genus, it's so obviously a cheetah that it was a fast running cat, right? And the idea is that the pronghorn basically outran it to extinction. That they left them behind. That they got so fast that they won the arms race, and that the cheetah went extinct because of that, because they couldn't catch them anymore. And now the pronghorn is fast as hell and doesn't really need to be so fast, but it's kept it up. Why not? And they're impervious to all the running predators as adults. Nothing can catch them. Wolves don't even bother. But as young, they are still vulnerable. So they're not immune from predation. And bobcats and coyotes.
I would think eagles too, probably.
When they're young,
they're
vulnerable. But as adults, nothing can touch them.
Wow.
Unless, of course, they're like sick or old or something.
Yeah, their reflexes are crazy. When I used to bow hunt, people would always talk about bow hunting pronghorn, and it's probably the most difficult North American animal to hunt because their reflexes, they're so quick that they can avoid an arrow.
Wow.
Like an arrow.
They can see it coming.
Yeah, they can. The only North American game animal that can dodge an arrow full flight.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I've never
Yeah.
heard that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, this is I don't know if it's been studied or if it's true, but
Well, there is a study out there that I'm kind of.
Did you bow hunt for them? Did you hunt for them?
I didn't. I always wanted to, but people,
I thought you were talking from firsthand knowledge.
No.
Man.
No, people just saying that they shot at them with a bow and watched them dodge it.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy. Yeah.
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they could outrun an arrow, but I could see them being like that instant twitch. They could just bound away really fast, and they're so quick that that's amazing. Yeah. So that's a cool. It's hypothetical. The way to test that, we need to do this. This is something that could be done. I'm gonna say this could be done in Mexico. There's a certain demographic of people in Mexico who collect big cats, and they've got a lot of money, and they like to keep big cats. And I bet you there's some cheetahs down there and some personal zoos. And there's pronghorn in northern New Mexico, down in your neck of the woods, down at Casas Grandes, right?
Yeah.
Just up the road, the Janos grassland. There's some pronghorn there. So all we got to do is get one of those captive cheetahs, take it out to the Janos, and test this hypothesis of whether or not a cheetah could catch a pronghorn. Because cheetahs, in order to catch, an impala, have to be, like 5 miles per hour faster, right? So that's why a cheetah is the fastest. But an impala is not as fast as a pronghorn. Pronghorns are faster than an impala. So it could be that because a pronghorn, if you're 5 miles an hour faster, a pronghorn dictates the chase, right? It decides whether it's going to turn or not. So you have to be 5 miles per hour faster, and you got to follow the prey, and that's hard to do. So if a pronghorn is just a hair faster than an impala and it's leading the chase, then that might be enough to outrun a cheetah. There's only one way to test this.
It has to be in Mexico,
and it's with drug dealers and their cheetahs.
There we go. Hey, I'll reach out to him. I'll reach out to him very soon. And I'd be totally down to try that. It'd kind of be
science.
It'd go viral, I bet.
What would be funny is probably what would happen is both animals would just stand there and not know what the hell to do.
Exactly, right.
You'd have to train the cheetah to go after something, because any of these captive ones, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're
nothing but ribeye.
Yeah.
Well, and they're probably bred, just like, they're probably inbred and something like that. They do some crazy stuff with that. So, all right, we're talking about apex defenders. Is there any animal out there that, like us, can build a fortification or be in a fortified area to where nobody can actually get them?
Yeah, so there's lots of burrowers that are pretty good at hiding because of their burrows, and that's more or less why they build those burrows, because they're more protected in the burrows. And they've got all kinds of interesting, side doors and things, and multiple entrances and egress points, and it's really, really clever. There's a kind of a cool example that's all in all the ecology textbooks of some birds that will nest, and it seems like they select these areas for nesting that are supposed to be impervious to predation. You'll like this. So that there are these groups of birds, and this is an example from South America. I think they're called oropendulas in this example. They're crow-like birds. They can be a little bit more colorful. I think they're more closely related to blackbirds. And so, like a red-winged blackbird is black with those beautiful red and yellow. So these are big red-winged blackbird type birds in South America, and they'll make these big hanging nests, almost like a weaver bird, right? These pendulous nests. That's one thing. They're building this impervious dangling thing that helps them from, any kind of a predator trying to climb up and get into that nest has a really hard time. They have to climb down that little dangling testicle-like nest, and they're going to fall off. And really only a snake could ever pull that off. And snakes are probably the main predators of the nest. But they don't. That's not it. They build these dangling nests and colonies, and there's always hundreds of these things on watch to mob any potential predator.
Mm.
And they preferentially put those nests next to gigantic hornets' nests.
Oh, smart.
That if any predator screws with the hornets, that they're moving around. And presumably the birds are, aware enough of those nests that they're never going to touch them, but a predator could touch them and then all hell. And this is done on islands surrounded by a moat.
Right. There you go.
Full
Wow.
of caiman. How's that? Does that fit your...
That is a fortified arena, my friend. Yeah. So are they the
moat with dragons? And it's full on, and that's where they choose to make their nests.
Wow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are flying venomous snakes who can enter the nest.
That is true. Yeah.
No doubt. I have no doubt there's nest robbing snakes that still get them, and they probably get in at night. And
Wow.
all down that pitiless nest. Everybody's sleeping. The hornets are sleeping. The birds are sleeping, and they clean out their nests anyway. Because snakes are the ultimate nest robbers. They've driven a lot of the nests that you see that birds make and the place where they put them, the extent that they go through to hide them and to use materials that don't smell like anything, all that's because of snakes.
Wow.
So you mentioned the hornet's nest. That gives me another example of more of an active defender. We've been talking about passive ones, but have you all seen the videos of we've done a show on murder hornets, and we probably talked about this, but these giant hornets that will enter beehives, and the bees will completely envelop them and will vibrate
and microwave them
and
microwave them.
Because it's like 1 degree difference between when the bees will die and when the hornet will die.
Yeah. And they just kind of circle them in the hive mind. That's interesting too, because it's controlled by a hive mind, like what you were talking about earlier with the pack mentality, and the bees just surround this hornet. But 4 hornets will just straight up kill a colony of bees, like easy. But yeah, what they do is they coordinate and they kind of microwave this hornet,
vibrate
in the air,
heat it up, and not to where it dies.
heat it up.
Totally. Birds could do that with snakes if they, as far as I know, that's never evolved. Yeah, snakes doesn't take much to kill a snake with temperature. And the average body temperature of most birds is warmer even than mammals, and obviously they can tolerate it. So if they just did like a little shivering thing right on a snake's head, it would only take like 30 seconds of that, and a snake would die. Snakes have, their upper thermal limit. If you leave a snake out in a jar in the sun, it just takes like 2 seconds to fry it. Supposedly old timers used to kill like a western diamondback. They would just drag it out from underneath its shady shrub with a shovel,
Mm-hmm.
and make it stand in the sun for a minute.
Wow. Cow. That's brutal. So the sun is a form of defense.
The sun could, their upper threshold, they don't have any of the physiological, ways of dealing with excess heat like mammals and birds do. And so they can quickly succumb to body heat like that. But yeah, as far as I know, no bird has taken advantage of that. Like bats could easily mob. I mean, it'd probably be easier just to like kick the crap out of the thing and drag it out of there. But that's something that bats could probably do in a colony. They could mob a snake that was there and kill it with their body heat.
Wow. I mean, the ways that animals survive and defend themselves is just unbelievable. Are there any other apex defenders that we can think of?
I've got a question. Since we've talked about all these different ones, what do y'all think the best defender is of all time? The heavyweight,
not counting humans, right?
I've got mine.
Okay,
mine.
Let's hear yours, Sean.
So there's one this is considered the world's smallest apex predator. Now, so this one, the title of this show is going to be Apex Defender. So I guess it fits for that too. But we've been kind of thinking of things that are like, herbivores or not predators that defend themselves really well. And of course, none of them can defend themselves that well because they all get eaten anyway. But what an apex predator is basically a predator that's on the top of the food chain. So it's a predator that eats everything else, but nothing is big enough or tough enough to eat it, right? That's what makes it an apex predator. And so obviously something like a tiger, nothing normally eats tiger, so it's an apex predator. There's a fairly small apex predator. It's only like a meter long at the biggest, like 3 feet long. The electric eel.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
Consider it like the world's smallest apex predator. They are predators. They eat other electric fish, and nothing else eats it. Nothing can. Even a caiman, like a black caiman, could try to eat an electric eel. Black caiman's like 3 meters long, like almost the size of an American alligator, and they would be electrocuted trying. And so that electrocution defense mechanism they have is so good it can electrocute a grown man, kill a grown man. And so nothing really messes with it. I'll bet there's probably some things out there that occasionally sneak up on them, swallow them whole. They may pay the price. I can imagine the black caiman swallowing one whole and dying trying to eat one. And so every now and then, I'm sure electric eels succumb to predation. But, all things being equal, that's a really well-defended animal. It's jumped way outside of the arms race and become a real kind of superhero within.
That's a really, really good one too.
Imagine the fossil record, right? In 20 million years, people would look at these electric eels in the fossil record if they even turned up, and none of its defense would show up, right? It would just be this long vertebral column and a skull. And it'd be like, you would never guess that this thing was the most, ambitious, badass superhero fish of the Amazon basin from its skeleton. You'd never know. So there could be, like in the Mesozoic, there could be equally astounding adaptations.
Electric ankylosaur. Yeah. That's what keeps evolutionary scientists awake at night, is thinking of those things.
An electric ankylosaur.
Yeah. So, there's so much weird shit that we have on Earth today that we can actually observe. And then we've got, life's been around for 3.7 billion years.
Yeah.
Like what existed back then that we will never know.
Oh yeah. And then we can only speculate, right? And dream about. But you were talking about, mine's not the best, but it's definitely the funnest, I think. And that would be Triceratops, because it has this layered defense with offense combined. So it's a defender, but also an offender, but it's also a herbivore. So
and they have that sort of tank body shape too.
Yeah, they have the tank body shape. It's hard to flip them over. And I was always fascinated growing up too with the 2 horns and then the one little spike right in the middle on their nose, and then the big shell behind it. And
there is debate as to whether or not that shield actually served a defensive function too.
Well, I would think it would defend its neck, right?
Well, the problem is it's vascular, so it had blood vessels running through it. And if you want some armor that is going to protect your neck, you don't want it to be full of
veins. And yeah. Wow. Okay. I never thought of it that way.
It had big openings too that probably supported like flesh. So
yeah.
But yeah, I doubt it. I doubt there was anything that would actively search for Triceratops to try and kill.
Right. Because defense, offense mixed together, he'll just be chilling on those ancient plants back then. What do you think?
I'm going to go with the dinosaur too. And I'm going to go with another. I think Sean's got us beat with novel defense approaches with electric eel.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with size as the most effective defense, because in the Cretaceous we had the largest things to ever walk on land, the titanosaurs. And I can see something preying on an ankylosaur, even with all of its armor, a Triceratops, but a fully grown titanosaur, something like Argentinosaurus, or even our local guy, Alamosaurus. T-Rex, there's no way. No.
Babies, maybe, but the like African elephants have done that, right? Nothing goes after full-grown African elephants because of the size. And then they're herding. And lions can team up if they find a baby elephant. They can team up and take one down, but that's if somehow they're separated from their mother, which they never are. That's if you have those Argentinosaurs in a big herd with their babies in the middle, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. Some of them had like whip-like tails. Some of them had, in that group, some of them had armor, osteoderms.
Wow.
Saltosaurus had osteoderms on it. We think Allosaurus might have even had those because it's closely related. So they were bad. They're big bad animals.
And they were,
and I guess another sort of modern analog would be whales, which are even bigger.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The blue whale.
Yeah, nothing messes with blue whale
unless you're an 18th century Ahab.
Yeah, Captain.
Same thing with blue whales. The killer whales can take down baby blue whales if they find them undefended, which they never do. Killer whales can. It's not. Have you seen killer whales? How they'll take down whales?
Yeah.
They
just peg it to death. Yeah.
They drown them. It's crazy. Good luck. It's not easy, and it's like the way we started off is like, the killer whales have to be good at it, and they have to decide this is a good moment. This is worth our time. This is not going to end up being a 6-hour duel to drown this baby whale with its mother trying to drown us.
Right. Yeah.
It's got to be worth it. So, and that's rarely the case. And so they're like, let's just go eat these seals. And that's the way it would have been with those giant, sauropods. It would have been a rare deal. When I bet every now and then a T-Rex.
They probably gave it a shot. Yeah.
There's a baby and it's off by itself and mama doesn't know. I'm just gonna run in here and see if I can snatch this thing. It probably happened every now and then. The babies are always. They probably did things like impalas, gazelles. They'll drop all their kids at the same time. This is a defense. It's amazing. It's so straightforward and it's so counterintuitive. But gazelles in Mongolia, gazelles on the African plains, almost everywhere. They'll calve at the same time. They drop thousands of babies and they're in these huge herds and they drop them. They're all synchronized. They drop all these babies within a week of each other. So there's tens of thousands of baby gazelles, and the wolves are there. The leopards are there. They're munching. They're eating as many as they can. They're getting a hold of them, but they can't. Then they're gorged. Then they can't eat any. And so, even though they've lost like 10% of the population in a week, 90% of the population doesn't get touched because they grow up fast. And then once they're at a certain size and speed, they're invincible. And by dropping them all at once, they basically fed the predator population to satiety for a week. And then the predators are just sitting there while the babies grow up. And I would almost guarantee you that same thing happened in the Cretaceous. Yeah, where all there would have been these huge nesting congregations of sauropods. They would look after the babies while they grew up fast, and the T-Rex would be sitting there full and go, I couldn't possibly eat anymore. Sauropods. Yeah, man, that's a cool adaptation.
No, that's brilliant too. That's very brilliant when you think about it. So
just get big.
All right. Well, that does it for the Apex Defenders show. A really good show. I appreciate y'all listening in, and we'll see you next week with another episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K. And we'll see you next time.